Hello, everybody. We are fancying up our Wednesday wine with Ana Belaval live from Chicago because today we want to honor someone fabulous. I don't know how much you know about our Spanish TV, Latin American culture, but in a lot of our shows, instead of having the weather report or besides having the weather report, we would have the horoscope. It's totally normal to have the horoscope, right? But there was one astrologer that everyone swore by. And that man, or that human, because he was even more than a man or a woman, was Walter Mercado. I grew up in Puerto Rico, as you all know. If you Google Walter, you will see that Walter not only gave you an amazing horoscope, but dressed to kill. Always with a cape, hence my sequence in honor of Walter Mercado, and always had a positive vibe. You would tune in for Virgo, Sagittarius, Cancer, but you would stay for the message because even if your sign, I'm a Virgo, even if your sign didn't make any sense, what he said, his message for the other signs were beautiful. We're of love, we're of unity, of celebrating diversity. And we're talking that I grew up in Puerto Rico between the late 70s, 80s. I left in 92 for college. So yes, Walter Mercado was known for his capes, his larger than life persona, and his message of love. And three Latinx directors and producers decided to do a documentary on Walter Mercado. These are, I have to call them kids because they're younger than me. They didn't grow up in Puerto Rico. Actually, they're not Puerto Rican, but they knew Walter because if your grandma was taking care of you here in the United States and she was watching Univision during Primer Impacto, Walter would show up and Abuela would tell you to be quiet because we had to pay attention to Walter. I don't know how many people are watching us right now and from where, but with likes and hearts, tell me how many of you know what I'm talking about, right? So I come from, you know how I come from Menudo before Ricky Martin? I come from Walter before Primer Impacto. Walter was an icon in Puerto Rico before a lot of people knew him, but eventually, I would say in the 80s, he became worldwide. Everyone knew Walter. And this documentary called Mucho Amor tells you how he became larger than life and then what happened to him because all of a sudden, Walter disappeared. Puerto Ricans knew where he lived. If you lived on the island, you knew where Walter was, but you said, I thought, Walter retired. But that's not what happened. And this documentary will tell you absolutely everything you wanted to know about Walter Mercado and we'll put him in context for you. It's called Mucho Amor because that's how Walter would finish his segments, con mucho amor, right? So see, I have so many people. Giselle remembers him. Yvette Sosa, I would watch him all the time. Alejandro would watch Walter all the time. He was kind of androgynous, and that is all. Those are all topics that the documentarians explored, and that Walter freely spoke about. It's sad because 3 months after the documentary was ready, Walter passed. So these three guys, two Cuban guys and a beautiful Argentinian, smart. I have a friend who calls her a prodigy. From Milwaukee, Wisconsin, produced this and hung out with Walter during his last months of life. I want to introduce her to you now because I know Christina is very busy with press for this amazing Netflix documentary. That what I love is that Walter, who has been an icon, a pop icon in our culture, is now well known by over 145 countries thanks to Netflix because the documentary is on Netflix. So I want to introduce you to Cristina Constantini, who today told me she is from Milwaukee. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm dressed in my sequins like you to match you and to match Walter.
Oh, I totally checked your Instagram and I noticed that you had a short little video con una capa puesta. And I was so happy.
You know, we joke that we made the documentary so that we could wear the capes because we did on almost every shoot. And at first we would do it kind of like discreetly.
Uh-huh.
After we were done shooting and Walter left the room, we'd put on the cape that he was just wearing and take pictures. And then we realized he actually really loved when people wore his capes, and he really loved like making other people happy. So we tried on hundreds of capes.
Are you kidding?
It was so much fun. Yeah, we even wore them to our Sundance premiere. We got to wear Walter's capes. So it was really special. It was really
Christina, I was going to ask you because when I grew up, okay, here's my story with Walter Mercado. And I know that you guys are tired. Alex Humero and Kareem are tired of hearing everyone's 6 degrees of separation from Walter Mercado.
No, I'm not. I want to hear. I want to know.
So I belonged to a ballet in Puerto Rico for kids, like a teatro infantil, right? And we had a recital every year. And so Walter had this show on Channel 7, and he would invite, whatever was going on in the community, he would invite him to perform. So I go to Walter's show as a little girl, and this man is larger than life, right? Imponente.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. I may have been 8 or 9. Now, my mother took me to the studio, and my mother danced with Walter because Walter.
Wow.
Que Mami no se acuerda if it was españoles or ballet, but my mom's 81, but she remembers that Walter was a very handsome man, but very unique.
Yes, definitely very unique. And he was a trained dancer for many years. I'm sure you know this, but he everything, even his astrology, you could see he was a trained flamenco dancer, and everything he did was the hands come from flamenco and from ballet, and you can see his training. He was also an actor. He brought that to the table. Like he used all of his different gifts to create that amazing persona that he had.
Because at the beginning of your documentary, he tells you that he was born in El Campo, in Ponce, in the mountains, from a farming family, and he noticed he was different.
Exactly. Yeah, I the way he tells it is that he felt different, so different inside from the people around him. His father was a farmer. His brother wanted to be a farmer, but he was like, that is not what I want to do. And his mother who was very important to him. She was incredibly well read. She loved the arts. And she said, Walter, being different is a good thing. You should go on being different. Like I want you to be different. Being normal, being like all these other boys is boring. And you are special. So you have to be different. And for all of his life, his mother was the person behind him saying, this is okay. This is great. You're different. This is great. And I think it really speaks volumes to, all it takes is one person telling you that you can be you.
Absolutely. And how important it is for a parent to be supportive. I could not believe it. I mean, the pictures are black and white. Walter was over 80 years old when he passed away. And we're talking rural Puerto Rico. Right? So these are not people with money, well-traveled people. They're not living in San Juan or even downtown Ponce, which many believe is the second capital of Puerto Rico. And she was wise enough to set him on that path.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what I always think is, just like his mom gave him permission to be himself, I think in many ways Walter, in his own way, gave a lot of other people permission to be themselves. And my co-director, who's gay, always says that, I always saw Walter and thought, if my family couldn't love him so much for being like that, maybe they can love me too. And so I think it's like of incredible importance, especially during that time. And brave.
Cristina, growing up in Wisconsin, and I know your dad is Argentinian. How do you get to know Walter? And why did you want to tell his story later on?
Yeah, as a kid, I remember going over to my grandmother's house whenever she would babysit me, which was whenever my parents were working, and just watching Walter on television with her, like everybody else. And I remember, seeing him and being captivated by him and being amazed by his outfits and his hair and his jewelry and just and the fact that he knew the future. I was like, who is this wizard? Who is this person? And I didn't speak Spanish that well at the time, but I was just captivated by him. And then as an adult, I think I started to realize, wow, this is really revolutionary what this person is doing. And especially the fact that he did it then when Spanish language television was mostly like, guys chasing women in bikinis and soccer, and then all of a sudden there's Walter. It's like, he really stood out, and it was really special. And I think oftentimes the Latino culture is painted with a very singular lens by mainstream media. We're narcos, the immigration issue, but Latin culture is so complex, and there's so many beautiful different facets to celebrate, and Walter is definitely a very fabulous facet. So I felt like it was time for him to be celebrated.
I know.
And also the fact that I hadn't heard about him for a long time, and when you're that fabulous, it's hard to disappear. And so when I started doing more research, I kind of figured out that things had gone sour, and I don't want to give anything away. I think people should watch the documentary, but that was a very interesting dynamic of how things can go wrong.
What I noticed is that, like, when I was telling you the story about how he seemed larger than life to me, were you guys hesitant to approach him? What did you expect when he opened the door at his suburban San Juan house, and he said, "Welcome"? Were you intimidated? What were you expecting to find, and what did you find that you show us in the documentary?
Yeah, it's kind of like going to the North Pole to meet Santa Claus.
Yes.
It's like, you can't believe that you're actually doing it as you're doing it. And we were very nervous and very excited. And when we got there, he wasn't ready. So Willie, who you'll meet in the film, his assistant and life partner of sorts, led us into the house, and we waited for about 45 minutes. And we were in this sunken-in living room. We'll never forget. The living room is 3 feet below the hallway. So he's above us, and he comes in, and he like floats in, and he's wearing the simplest thing I've ever seen him wear, just a white linen shirt and white linen pants, but very elegant, and these golden kind of 70s golden glasses. And with his hair like a lion and just beautiful. And he floated in, and it was the closest to a religious experience I've ever had. It was incredible. He was also so sweet. So he greeted us. He like held our hands. He looked into our eyes. Anyone who's ever met Walter will tell you that he really pays close attention to giving respect and attention to every person in the room. So he looked at us very deeply and congratulated us. He had done his research, but it was a very special moment. And I kind of blacked out. I didn't remember most of it, but my friend recorded it. So I rewatched it since. It was really a beautiful moment. And during the process of, that was the first day, but during the process of 2 years of filming, we really became close to him, and he became more like a member of our family. And I think we got to know the real Walter. My co-director and producer were pallbearers in his funeral, and we are very close with the family. We are very close with Willie. We have
how long did you shoot for?
So it was over a period of 2 years we were filming.
Wow.
But we were filming, we would come to the island and film for a week and then leave, and come to the island and film for a week and then leave.
And what's when you said he was dressed in crisp linen, that's how my mom goes to the beach. Okay. Yeah. He's a man of a certain quality of life that reminded me of my mother. When I saw him have breakfast, Cristina, with the vajilla and the little plate and el jugo in a nice glass. This is why I have like champagne. I pulled out La Ligue just to make Walter really proud. Like, these are all the tchotchkes that I saw during the documentary. And I was like, Walter, es como ver a mami. And I say that with the utmost respect because he had this vibe of living honestly and living as fabulous as you wanted. Desayunaba con caché. You know what I'm saying? Like, everything in his life had joie de vivre and had quality to it.
Yeah, at the beginning we would say to the nieces, we want to get to the real Walter. When are you going to, we need to break through. We camera Walter, and they were like, you've been with Walter when the cameras are off for days. That's actually what Walter's like. That is actually how Walter acts. He is fabulous on camera, but he's also fabulous off camera. I love this story. He has a great grandniece who who was born shortly before he passed away, and she was 5 weeks old, and they were going to bring her into the room to meet Walter. And Walter wouldn't let the baby in until he had really done his face and his hair, because he didn't want the baby to remember him by, he wanted to be remembered by how he wants to look, not, how he looks without his face on. So,
and I heard that you guys are saying that sometimes, he didn't notice that you were recording and that he would say action. And then you'd be like, we've been rolling the entire time. You feeding your doctor, you fighting with Willie. And he would be like, because was he a micromanager? Was he trying to produce?
He was, he's been in front of a camera for 30 years at least. And so he knew what the camera meant. And I've never worked with somebody who's so media trained. So when the camera was on, he knew his angles, he knew how he wanted to present. And he also never wanted to waste tape, because he came up during a time when there was no room for wasting tape. So everything you recorded was in the film. And so, he would try to deliver an interesting, beautiful experience every time the camera was rolling. And that became problematic, because you can't do a film of 90 minutes of just voguing, although ours is pretty close. But we had Walter, okay, so what you see that is, we had to explain to him, we want you in your actual habitat. And he was like, oh, but this is so boring. You don't want, me eating breakfast. Who's going to want to watch that? And so, it was a learning process, I think, for both sides. He would ask us at the beginning when he was going to get the scripts for the day. Like, the scripts for our documentary? Anyway, it was
I love it because, you said you left a lot on the floor, on the editing floor, and you're going to do some outtakes, not outtakes, but like minis for social media.
Yeah, exactly. There's some that are live already. There's a story that he calls his dirty talking bird. He got a parrot as a gift that was, well, you should watch it. I'll send it to you.
Okay, send it to me. But where in social media do we find that stuff?
You can find it on our Instagram at Mucho Amor Movie, or you can also find it Con Todo, which is the Netflix Latinx Twitter, and Instagram too.
Oh, okay. So I have to admit something to you. I grew up during the generation that made fun of Walter Mercado. It was machista, homophobic, and Walter never came out as gay, never came out as straight. And it kind of bothered, especially men, like, just define yourself so that we can be sure what we're getting into. And you guys did such a beautiful job broaching the subject, and showing how mean they could be, but then how he confronted them in his very soulful and caring way.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to watch. Not only do you have to go through that bullying, but you are able to respond more quickly. I mean, he's on that Mexican talk show where there are five straight men basically making fun of him ruthlessly.
Yeah.
And he is so quick. He has a response and a comeback. And you even see when we interview him and are trying to ask him the same question in a much different context.
Yeah.
I think we say to him, you don't like talking about your sexuality. And he says, yes, because sexuality for me is spiritual. I have sex with the wind. I have sex with the air. I have sex with and then Kareem, my co-director, says, well, you're not telling me you're a virgin. And he squares up to the camera and he goes, the only one in town. And I remember that delivery was so genius, and he was so funny that we all started laughing and totally forgot the train of conversation, which was genius. He's a genius at driving the conversation in the way that he wants to take it.
And you're an investigative reporter, so you are supposed to dig, y te desarmó.
Exactly. I think with Bill Bakula, I was able to do it. But Walter was so funny that it was much, much harder I still think he's the hardest person I've ever had to interview, because
even though he was so smart.
He was so smart and so sweet, and it was just hard to guide the interview. He just wouldn't let you. He would answer whatever question he wanted to answer. He would tease you. I once broke a vase in his house, which was very bad. I replaced it, but he would make fun, and every time he didn't want to answer a question, he would tease me and make fun of me and make fun of the fact that I had broken the vase. So
Exacto. Que de milagro te dejaba entrar a la casa. You know, you touched on Bill Bakula, and I want people to watch Mucho Amor, because there's this man, Bill Bakula, who is the hero and the villain, I would say, because he's the reason that the world gets to know Walter. But then he has Walter sign away his rights pretty much. And you'd think, when I was watching Christina, I was like, I found the bad guy. Here we go. Ahora que esto se va a poner bueno. I found someone to hate in this story. And all of a sudden, when you watch the documentary, you notice that neither one of them is willing to criticize each other. And there's still, like you told David Begnod, there's still love there. And so it's, again, Walter wins because love wins. And he's like, it happened. We move on.
Yeah, you know, the best thing I could relate it to would be like a relationship when you divorce from somebody. If you've been with them for a long time, there's still oftentimes a lot of love there and a lot of respect. And when times were good, you loved each other a lot. And so just straight up, you know, to destroy that, I think is not how either of them feel. And they both have a lot of really loving things to say to each other. And even Walter to talk about those times was very difficult because he never focuses on the bad things, you know. He always, I mean, even in his horoscopes, you see that. He'll always say that tomorrow's going to be a better day. Even if today was hard, tomorrow's going to be a better day. And I think, you know, we needed that when he was giving us those words.
You know, in Puerto Rico, I think he died, and that's why we went to hell now. Él lo sabía.
I've seen a lot of tweets that said that Walter had a protective barrier around the earth, and that when he disappeared, that barrier had force field had frayed, and that's where we are. Where we are.
Yep. And it's interesting because I hear people of all socioeconomic backgrounds on the island saying the same thing you guys who grew up here watching him would do. You'd find them inexplicable. Like, you couldn't explain them, but then you'd be like, wait a minute, what is he saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Did he say yellow underwear for New Year's Eve? That's what I'm wearing.
Yeah, just in case. You know, who knows? If that's how my grandfather was. My grandfather my abuelito would pretend he wasn't listening, but I could tell he was like in the back, just in case that Walter was right, you know?
Christina, you are an award-winning documentarian. You were born and raised in Milwaukee?
Yeah, that's right. Born and raised in Milwaukee.
And you have done an award-winning documentary called Science Fair. Very different than Mucho Amor. Are they very different? Did you find any connection?
Yeah, I mean, they are very different stories, but I will say both of them are stories from my childhood. I was a science fair kid, and it really gave me a lot of hope and made me feel validated during the dark years of high school. And so as a filmmaker, I often try to think of stories that I'm uniquely suited to tell, stories from my background, stories from my childhood. And so Science Fair and Mucho Amor are both stories that get at more important points about life and about the world we live in, but use kind of a very happy, funny subject matter to get at those. So, you know, I think they seem like totally unrelated, like couldn't be by the same filmmaker, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of tone. I think if you watch both, they're
where can we watch Science Fair right now?
Science Fair is on Disney Plus.
Oh, I just got Disney Plus for Hamilton.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So I would totally watch that. You know what I love too, and I always comment this with my friends Lorena Diaz and Wendy Mateo, who are directors and actors here in Chicago. For people who were raised in the United States, you guys, much better than me, because I've only been on the mainland, only been here for 25 years. You were raised in a dichotomy, in two cultures. right? So I think mainstream says, oh, your dad's Argentinian, so you are just Latina story. That's all you can tell. You can tell the Walter Mercado story. But then you have something that your grandma probably thought was una americanada, like a science fair.
Yes,
Que
exactly.
nada más que los americanos hacían. But that story, mainstream would tell you, she's going to tell it. No. We want her to tell the tango story, and how they had her admire Maradona and that kind of thing. So I think what you're doing is showing that navigating those two worlds allows you to tell such rich stories.
Yeah, I'm hoping to navigate that. I'm trying to find that balance of how do you tell stories that are from your culture, and also, and because there are not that many Latino filmmakers, and there's so many stories to tell. So I want to be part of helping tell our stories. So how do I tell those stories? But then how do I not get pigeonholed into like, oh, that's the director, he did Latina stories. So I'm trying to balance that, and I don't know what the answer is, but I'm trying.
What's your next project, Christina?
I'm not sure yet. I have a few scripts that I'm working on. I'm trying to get into scripted projects. This thing, it's hard to talk about it before it's like funded.
No lo haga, don't jinx it.
Yes.
Toca madera, no lo haga. We're riding the wave of Mucho Amor, which is now on Netflix. How did you end up being a documentarian? Because I know friends that know you from working at Fusion, at Huffington Post, at ABC as an investigative reporter. And did you go to Yale to be a journalist?
I was in the Yale journalism program, but there's no major. I was a political science major. I started at Huffington Post as a print reporter and an editor, with a focus in immigration. I then went to ABC News, and Univision started Fusion. So I went there and was doing immigration reporting as well. And then they decided to trust me to learn how to make television. And I'm so grateful to that place for letting me, and Keith Suma and Isaac Lee in particular, for letting me learn on the job. That was the first time I had used a camera. That's the first time I had to learn how to tell a story. And I think it was really great training, because if you can make immigration and immigration law and detention center stories and prison stories, if you can make those resonate with people, then you can make easier stuff resonate. So it really taught me a lot about storytelling, story structure, and just the basics of how to use the gear and how to mic a person. So I feel like I went to film school and journalism school, and I got paid. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, and then how do you end up doing documentaries? Was it at Fusion that you did your first ones, I think?
Yes, so Univision financed, and Fusion financed Science Fair, which was, a crazy thing for them to do. I was an investigative reporter at the time, and I wanted to do a happy story. And so I asked Isaac Lee and Keith Suma if I could, and they said, sure, why not? Like, why don't we give you a try? You've done other good work. And so I made that film with my co-director, Darren Foster. And to our great surprise, we got into Sundance. And to our even greater surprise, we won the Festival Favorite Award. And then we went on to South by, and we kind of started picking up audience awards. And then we sold it to National Geographic there. And then, the rest is history. Then from Sundance, I went straight to Puerto Rico and met Walter. So it was a really crazy time.
I love it, because when I found out you guys weren't Puerto Rican and you were able to tell his story with such authenticity and reverence, even though you dug deep, I was so proud of you. And I was, we tend to be kind of snobby when we're like, okay, no son puertorriqueños, okay, whatever, whatever, and then whatever. But it was beautiful. And I want to read some of the comments. So Juanita Mora has a question for you. Yeah. And she says, as you were wrapping up your interviews with Walter Mercado, did he know he was going to pass away soon?
The last time I was with Walter was 5 weeks before he passed away. And we thought he had he was physically unwell, but his mind was so sharp. And we thought, this might be the beginning of the end, but it seemed like he could make a comeback, or his body could recover from some of this. But then we said goodbye, and as we said goodbye, we were about to leave. We were packing up, and Willie called us over and said to Kareem and I, my co-director, Kareem and I, said, you should go back in and say goodbye to Walter one more time. Walter wants you to say goodbye again. And I think that was the moment that we were like, that was as we were leaving, we were like, this might be the last time we see him. This might be what that is. And sure enough, it was 5 weeks later, we got the call. We submitted November 1st to Sundance. November 2nd, Walter passed away, and we got the call. And then we were immediately back on the island for the funeral. So it's been a real, up
and down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Angelica, it was so beautifully done. What a way to learn about him and his life in front and behind the camera. We really needed those shots. We really needed to find out, someone else said, I enjoyed the documentary a lot. You brought a lot of people to tears, but I think we were all very nostalgic. Some of us of a certain age.
Yeah. I think, we wanted to make a film that celebrated Walter in a way that the people who really knew Walter, who really watched him a lot, would feel that nostalgia. But also we wanted to share him with everyone else. We feel so lucky to have grown up with this magical wizard. And he was ours, and in Puerto Rico's more specifically. But to be able to share him with a wider audience, in the Netflix audience, we were number 6 and number 7. We were number 6 last week on the streaming platform for movies. So it can't just be Latinos that are watching him. I think
no,
we're learning who Walter is.
I think someone is asking, what did he pass away from? I think everything, including his age, is undisclosed.
Yeah, I think it was kidney failure ultimately, is what they said on the death certificate. But he had a broken rib. He had a whole bunch of hip that was fractured. And he was in tremendous pain. I'm not sure. I think it was kidney failure.
Did you take any capes? Did he give you any capes? Did you steal anything from the house besides breaking? Christine, are you there? Oh, I think we lost her for a second. Let me see. She froze on me. Maybe she can come back. Let me see. Christina, if you can hear me and you want to, let me see. Are you back? Are you back? Yay! So I thought you had gotten mad at me because I asked if you had taken anything from the house.
No. He gave us some presents, but I didn't take anything from the house aside from, of course, the vase that I broke.
The vase that you broke. But seriously, you guys have una carta astral signed by Walter Mercado. You can die happy now.
I know. We're so lucky. We're so lucky.
There is one thing I wanted to touch. You didn't talk about this because you wanted to do it about Walter Mercado, but I kept thinking how complex our Latino relationship is with all sorts of spirituality. Because Walter Mercado spoke about las estrellas, about astrology, but he would say que Dios los bendiga. He had altars to the Virgin. He studied Hinduism. And obviously, growing up in Puerto Rico, I know that when we were colonized, not once but twice, but the first time we were colonized, Catholicism was brought in. And we were able to mix Catholicism with African religions like Santeria and that kind of thing. And then Walter took it to yet another level. So you could believe in Walter and then get la bendición from Walter. We are complicated people.
Right. I think part of the genius of Walter is he kind of navigated the Catholicism with and started mixing the religions in. He was very well studied on the world religion.
Yes, he was. Actually, my mom thought that what happened to him that he went to India and found himself and then came back a guru. But no, you explained that that's not how he was discovered.
Yeah, he actually did go to India at some point and studied under Osho, who is the Bhagwan in Wild Wild Country. And the Bhagwan gave Walter the spiritual name Shantiananda. And what we don't go into the film is when everything goes wrong with Bill and he can't use his own name. The reason he started calling himself Shantiananda, his spiritual name, is because Bhagwan gave him that name. But he is very spiritual, very well studied. But I really think the brilliance of it was how much he taught and how he used his capes and his hair and his jewelry and his makeup. He used all of this visual medium to teach us. He would do 1 week on Hinduism. He would teach the horoscope through Hinduism, or 1 week on Buddhism. And he was, although he was, Catholic, I think at the end of the day, he was mixing religions to create some kind of interfaith version of religion for himself.
But it's genius, Cristina, because for you and I to pitch a story on explaining Hinduism to somebody on TV, they would have been like, oh my God, how? But Walter had this mysticism because of the persona he was, that he could sell it to everybody. This, Sarah M., we watched it last night. My husband and I were blown away by Walter's view on life. He was radiating positive clarity and hope. When the documentary was over, my husband and I talked about how we needed this.
That's so sweet. That's wonderful.
Isn't it wonderful?
My Wi-Fi.
No, you're good.
I think my Wi-Fi is very bad.
I can see you. I'm going to let you go soon, but I just want you to hear amazing work. The documentary was fantastic, reminiscent, and big part of the culture. And yes, we said that he discussed, thank you for sharing his wonderful life story with the world. Que orgullo. Cristina, not only do I love what you did with Mucho, Mucho Amor, but I can't wait to see what's next for you, because I wish a lot of us from the generation that was before you would have had the courage and the authenticity that your generation has had to tell all these stories in an honest way and honoring the culture that you came from.
Thank you so much. It means the world to me. I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for saying yes. I really appreciate it. Cristina Constantini, one of the directors, producers, probably la que puso el micrófono, rodó la cámara.
Exactly.
For Mucho, Mucho Amor. Don't miss it, and check out also Science Fair on Disney Plus. Que estés bien. We wish you all the success, and hopefully we can meet in person soon.
Yeah, gracias. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye-bye. Mucho amor, of course. All right, that was Cristina Constantini. What did you think? Isn't she amazing? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm biased, because any story that has to do with this kind of success always makes me happy. And of course, Walter, I kind of rediscovered him, to tell you the truth. After growing up, I didn't pay much attention to him. And sometimes I was mortified. I worked for Primer Impacto when I was a senior in college. And I would be mortified, like, ay, Dios mío, ¿por qué están poniendo el horóscopo? Why is the horoscope on? Why is this guy still on? And I never took the time to listen to what he was saying. And there was a whole generation of kids, when I was already working at Univision, that were listening to him because Abuela was making them. And they were like, wow, this man is so interesting. What is he? Is he a wizard? Is he a man? Is he a woman? And the fact that grandmas loved him, and you can hear that from one of the producers, from Kareem, the fact that grandmas would accept him and looking androgynous like he did and looking over the top would make members of the LGBT community feel comforted that maybe they'll love me too. So what did you think? What did you think of this interview with Cristina? Show me with likes, with comments. The name of the documentary, Elizabeth, is Mucho, Mucho Amor. So lots and lots of love. He would say goodbye every time with reciban de mí mucha, mucha paz, pero sobre todo, mucho, mucho amor. And I didn't have to memorize that. I knew that, like I know las canciones from church every time I go to church with my dad. It was part of our culture and part of our jargon. And what it means is receive from me lots of peace. And above all, lots of love. And he would finish it like that. And so that's what the documentary is named after. That's Sig Out is what we call in the business. Love you and love her. He got my attention all the time watching TV with my mom. Of course, of course. Hailey, es espectacular, una bendición que hayan podido hacerla y cubrir ese homenaje tan maravilloso en Miami. I see. Apparently, there is going to be an estate sale. One thing we didn't talk with Cristina is his 3 nieces were his protectors, right? They were the ones that were there with him till the end. He was always supportive of him. And the nieces and Willie, his assistant, were there till the end. And so they're going to have an estate sale because Alex Fumero, one of the producers, says that, excuse me, he had so many capes that the family can't keep them all. So keep an eye out for that estate sale. Oh, thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. I recommend the documentary. Go watch it and go watch whatever else you can find from Christina. She has Science Fair and another documentary she did while she was at Fusion that I think is a National Geographic, and was I think it may be this one too. Whine, so amazing. The way they told his story really brought back so many memories of watching him and waiting anxiously for him to say the horoscope for Toro, right? Taurus is what it is in English. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. If you are watching this on YouTube, leave me your comment. Tell me where you're watching from. All my friends from Facebook, I appreciate you joining me and learning a little bit more about Walter Mercado. Y claro, con todo mi orgullo puertorriqueño, because Walter was extremely proud of being Puerto Rican, just like I am. He wore it like a badge of honor. Reciban de mí mucha paz, pero sobre todo, mucho, mucho, mucho amor. See you next week.